Hello and welcome to Gerety Talks. My name is Lucia Ongay and I am the co-founder of Gerety Awards. Just like the award, this series will put in the spotlight and in the center of the conversation some of the industry's true change makers within the aim to drive progress in the industry at a global scale. Today we welcome Nandini Jammi. Welcome Nandini, thanks for joining
Hi,
us.
thank you so much for having me.
She's the co-founder of Sleeping Giants and co-founder of Check My Ads from the US. She has been immersed in the world of brand safety and digital advertising since 2016 when she began running Sleeping Giants, the social media campaign that alerted advertisers that their ads were funding hate speech on Breitbart News. Her efforts led to her being recognized by Business Insider as one of the industry leaders fixing digital advertising. Digiday named her a Digiday Changemaker. In 2019, Sleeping Giants won a Gold Can Lion Award for Best Social Media Campaign and a People's Voice for Public Service and Activism Webby Award. At Check My Ads, Nandini turns her social media experience into proactive strategies for brands. Prior to entering brand safety, she worked as head of growth and content marketing lead for tech startups in London and Berlin. She is originally from Washington, D.C. area and graduated from University of Maryland's Robert H. Smith School of Business with a degree in marketing. So thanks for joining us today for this Gerety Talk. So you launched Check My Ads in July 2020. Can you tell us about it? How does it work and what services do you provide?
Sure. Yeah, we launched in June 2020. We're a brand safety training consultancy. So we work with Fortune 500 companies and global brands to help them to identify disinformation and hate speech in their media buy. And then we help them to develop intentional advertising strategies to keep them away from that kind of content and to move them towards media that aligns with their brand values.
Great. And in your 24th issue of Branded, which is your newsletter, you explain you started with zero expectations since everybody has a newsletter these days, but you rocketed to 7,000 subscribers. So what was the key to that success?
Yeah, I mean, we started in January of 2020 when we really didn't know very much about how ad tech worked. We were still learning, and we just felt like, wow, we like my partner Claire Atkin and I, we were both like, we're learning so much stuff, and it's not common knowledge. It needs to be out there for marketers to know. Like, it was common knowledge, like the way that ad tech works was common knowledge for people in ad tech, but not for people like us. And so we decided to write about it because we felt like there was nobody with this unique angle. There was no one kind of like explaining this stuff to marketers. And I think also marketers were a little bit afraid to ask these questions because they thought they would seem dumb, but they're not. Like, I mean, these are reasonable reasonable questions that we should know the answers. We should know the answers to. So what's the secret to our success? We don't publish a whole lot. We publish like once every 2 weeks, and it's actually been like a month since we last published. What we do is we take everything that we write really seriously. So we actually spend days, sometimes weeks, writing a single post and going through edits and really finding the angle and the sort of communication style that makes the most sense to make these really difficult concepts in ad tech, these very like jargon heavy concepts in ad tech, accessible to the average person. So although we have our like target audience is marketers, and our calls to action are usually for marketers, and what they can do with their jobs to fix these issues that we have identified, we are accessible enough to the layperson. So like, my parents read it, they can understand it, they can keep up with it. We have like people who are in politics, we have lawmakers reading our posts, and we have folks in brand leaders and folks in software, and we just have a really broad appeal, and I think that's what has driven our success.
Yes, I have to say that while preparing the questions, For you, there were like lots of things that I'm not techie at all, so that I really didn't understand. So yeah, I guess that's important that you can tell to people that don't really know about this maybe. And you mentioned about your job in a startup in the UK where you were a one-woman direct marketing team trying to get companies to buy your employer's product, that you were fascinated by the psychology of the job. It's basically like running a persuasion machine. You've got to convince them to do something that they otherwise wouldn't have done. How do you master your art of persuasion? Do you think you have gotten better and better with time?
Yes. I got into marketing because I enjoyed writing and persuading people to do things. Um, and I definitely learned a lot on the job. My job was to, at my last job where I was head of growth for a tech company, my my job was to create a category. I was selling product management software at a time when people didn't know what product management software was or why they would need it. So I had this like much bigger task ahead of me of even just helping people understand and like define this completely new need for a thing that they thought, you know, Jira could handle. Um, so I have always thought big for all the problems that I'm trying to solve. So when I started working on Sleeping Giants, I was really thinking, um, you know, I was kind of thinking in this sort of methodical fashion, you know, like what can we do to just get this one, you know, this one company to drop Breitbart. And then it got bigger, right? I was like, okay, what can we do to get ad exchanges to drop Breitbart? What else can we do with this method that we have created, this method of like talking to companies on social media and making the case for, you know, not advertising on toxic content. And yeah, and then over time I realized, wow, there's a real business case for this. And brands really fear being found next to this type of content online. They really don't know how to keep uh, their ads away from this stuff. They really don't know how to keep their money away from this stuff. And I kind of find myself once again in this situation where I'm creating a category. Again, you know, brand safety was arguably something that existed before Sleeping Giants, but it wasn't such a big priority for brands at that time. And now, now I have this opportunity to help redefine what brand safety is. And yeah, and I do that every day through education on branded, of course, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I'm always talking about it. I'm always trying to get people to see things in a different way.
Do you think there has been a change in brand safety this last year with the pandemic or not necessarily?
I think that it really, well, during the pandemic, the Facebook ad boycott also happened. And the Black Lives Matter movement reignited, and there was just so much happening in the world, and consumers wanted to see that the brands that they shop with were doing something to contribute positively to their communities and to society. And so in a sense, yes, brand safety became even more important. But so when I say brand safety in that sense, I'm not talking just about advertising and your ad placements, but also as a whole. Brand safety to me is, you know, doing as you say or facing the consequences from the public. And when they see that you're being hypocritical, that makes you less safe as a brand. You're not able to protect your brand as well if you do one thing and say the other and try to get away with that. So yeah, in that sense, it became a lot more important. And I think between that and the Facebook ad boycott, which really kind of took brands out of like cruise control for the first time, they really started to rethink, you know, wow, like where would we advertise if we can't advertise on Facebook? And started to have really like existential conversations about what should our marketing strategy look like if all of a sudden one of our channels just becomes toxic or the source of another boycott.
Okay. And how did your previous jobs prepare you for what you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on that before. My career has always been in content and in writing and positioning and frankly, the work that I do now is all positioning. Brands come to us now trying to figure out where they should be spending their media dollars, and my answer isn't to tell them what to do, but it is to help them sometimes remind them what their own positioning is and what their own values are, and then help them to operationalize that in their media spend. So it's really, positioning is understanding where you stand in this landscape, in the spectrum of society, of the marketplace, and really and holding that and holding firm to that. And that's what I help them do in my capacity now as a brand safety consultant.
And you said in an interview, consumers have to understand they can make a difference by just speaking up. So maybe we mentioned a little bit about this. Do you think the pandemic accelerated this awareness, making consumers wanting more information about what they buy and where the products come from?
Yeah, I think consumers, we saw that some companies were out here helping. There was a bunch of liquor companies that switched over to selling, to manufacturing hand sanitizer, companies that started to distribute face masks and things like that. And people were like, yeah, I mean, if the businesses in our community can do that, why can't the biggest companies in the world do that as well? So I think one of the biggest shifts is that your messaging isn't just in your advertising and what you say. I think that this was the first time really that it was not appropriate to put out one of those sort of like feel good, we're coming together now ads. People were like, F you, this is not what we need in this moment. What we need in this moment is to see that, you walk your talk. And I think that is a permanent shift. I think consumers are going to be demanding action, and specifically action that aligns with the brand values that the brand comes out and talks about all the time. Say, okay, all right, let's see you do it. Let's see you do it.
And as marketer, you also said, as marketers, it is our job to connect with consumers. How do you do this? What are your sources to take the pulse on what people are feeling or concerned with at the moment?
Social media. Now, there's so many voices on social media. I think the challenge is to understand who your audience is, who it is that you want to answer to, and tailor your response to that. Now, I'm not saying change your response and act differently to each audience to please a certain audience, but rather to understand who your audience is and be beholden to them. I think social media is a really great place to see what people are saying about you. I think checking in with your employees to see how they feel about issues is also, I think, one of the most important things you can do, because I've seen so many times in the past few years, employees coming out and saying, this company, when I joined, I thought that they held XYZ values dear, but in fact, like, this has been my experience at the company, and that can also be very damaging to a brand. So they really need to be answerable to their employees first and foremost, and second, to be monitoring the way that people talk about issues on social media, and really be thinking about how they would respond as a company if they are somehow pulled into that conversation.
Okay. And so you mentioned basically social media is something that you pay very much attention to. But what are your sources when you really want to find out what is happening in the world? Or do you read any specific publications or media that you are most fond about?
Yeah, I read a little bit of everything. I mean, I subscribe to Washington Post. That's my sort of hometown newspaper. Um, the Times, Wired, um, and those are the I guess the national papers that I read. But I spend a lot of time. I think a very well curated Twitter account, and I really like to read the points of view of people that I respect and people who come from, I guess, a different world than I have. And I like to try out and absorb a lot of different viewpoints before I make my own. So I usually stay quiet on social media, particularly about things that I don't understand, and let others do the talking. Um, and yeah, so I stick to multiple sources.
And before check my ads, you co-founded Sleeping Giants, the campaign to make hate and bigotry unprofitable. Can you tell us about this award-winning campaign and how you came up with the idea?
Sure. So in the weeks after the 2016 elections, I went to visit Breitbart.com for the first time. I had never been on the site before, but I'd been hearing about it throughout the election. So I was like, now that Trump had won, I was curious to see what the site was about, what I was going to see on it. Breitbart was one of the most influential websites of the time. And so I was expecting to see a lot of, I guess, disturbing content and like some of these fake stories I'd been hearing about throughout the news cycle that they'd kind of managed to, push through. But the thing that I noticed as a marketer was the advertising, and I was seeing ads for all these companies that I shop with on this website. It was very jarring because, I don't normally visit, websites like this. So I was like, Old Navy, why is Old Navy advertising on this site? And after, like, it didn't take me long to sort of realize what was going on, of course, because of the way that programmatic advertising works. I'm not an expert here, but I knew that, you turn on your Google ads and they place your ads across the internet for you. So everyone just kind of had their ads on, and no one realized that their ads were being, ending up on websites like this. So I kind of came at it from the point of view of a marketer. I started taking screenshots of these ads and tweeting it at the companies, being like, "Hey, are you sure you want your ads here?" I linked up with someone else who had the same idea. Together, we worked under the pseudonym of Sleeping Giants, and we basically started to do this every single day. People noticed that we were getting results because these companies would reply to us very quickly. And it was not a huge impact at first because it doesn't really mean a lot for a handful of advertisers to block a website, but we were able to crowdsource this into like a much bigger campaign because people started to join us. Everyone was seeing different ads because they're being targeted differently. And within 3 months, we had thousands of advertisers who had dropped Breitbart, and we lost them 90% of their ad revenue within the first 3 months of our campaign.
Wow.
And so, yeah, they were supposed to make $8 million that year. They lost most of it. They were meant to go, they were trying to go launch new Breitbarts in France and Germany. That never happened. So we were able to stop them in their tracks.
Okay.
Yeah, and we grew from there. We took on a whole lot of other campaigns and initiatives, and one of them was getting Bill O'Reilly's advertisers to leave him, and he eventually lost his job as a result. We lost Tucker Carlson, currently on the news again. Every so often he says something just extremely egregious and horrible, and we have basically, it's at the point where he doesn't have any advertisers anymore. No one has come in to replace the advertisers that left. He's just like a really toxic, one of the highest rated and also the most toxic TV segments on the air right now. So if you want to advertise there, it's probably a pretty good deal, but it's probably not a great deal when you kind of take a step back and look at it. Yeah, and we've taken on countless, neo-Nazis and fascists and, all the bad people doing the bad things. We get them kicked off of off their payment providers and, hosting and all the tools that they're using to build their brands and businesses.
Okay, that's huge. And what do you think have been the most important changes in the ad tech industry in the last years?
I think the one biggest change is that companies care about where their advertising is appearing now. They didn't really have their eyes on the ball before, but now it is just anecdotally, as well as I think I've seen in surveys and I guess, yeah, just surveys online, that brand safety is a number one priority for brand leaders and advertisers. What hasn't changed, though, is the fact that the ad tech ecosystem is still funneling their money towards the same type of websites like Breitbart, and they're doing it without the knowledge or consent of these brands. So I think that we have an opportunity here to continue to educate marketing leaders about how their money is being spent, and an opportunity as well to call out these the supply chain that allows this to continue happening, because they aren't checking their inventory, they're not vetting their sources, they don't have a disinformation and hate speech policy, and so they just keep letting these bad faith publishers into their inventory and continuing to let them funnel cash towards these disinformation efforts that ultimately undermine our society and our democracy.
So what do you expect to find in campaigns for 2021? What kind of stories or ideas would you like to see or brands to tell us this year?
I would like to see brands tell stories about what kinds of initiatives that they're taking on in communities to make a difference. I think that we see a lot of messaging, again, a lot of talk around what their values are and what it is that they care about. I would like to see them reflect more on what their audiences and what their customers really care about. I hope they take the time to do that customer research and development, and really start to reflect those values back in their advertising and in their messaging in the future. I think that when you see a brand authentically communicate your values back to you, we feel more comfortable sharing that content and recommending those products to our friends.
Okay, great then. So thank you very much for joining us and letting us know about AdTech. I hope everything goes great for you and you have a great year. And thanks for all your insights and opinions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.